Theruvan Sarnai. We are about to commence the sermon, and we will do so shortly. Please can you confirm that the stream is audible? And we will commence as soon as you can confirm to us that you can hear me. Okay. Let's begin then. So as usual, before we commence the sermon today, let us all take a moment to remind ourselves of how fortunate we are to be students of the Buddha, to be his disciples, to consider him the master, our teacher, to guide us through the riddle of samsara, and to free ourselves once and for all. So as we embark upon this opportunity, let us all take a moment to pledge our allegiance to the Lord Buddha as his disciples, and as we always do, we will do so by reciting the Dhirasa Vigata Mohasa stanza. Last week, you remember, I introduced the second stanza from a set of 10, and we will commence today's sermon by reciting this aloud. So if you are at home or in a convenient place to do this, can I please ask you all to be upstanding as we recite the stanzas, and we will then observe the precepts and commence the sermon. On screen you should be able to see the words of the stanzas, and as we move on to the second one, I will flick the page over so you can follow the text on the screen. Dhirassa vigata mohassa pabhinna khilassa vijita vijayassa anighassa susamachittasya buddha silasya sadhupanyasya vesantarasya vimalasya bhagavato tasya savakohamasmi akatankatisya tusitasya vantalokamissasya muditasya katasamanasya manujasya antimasarirasya narasya anopamasya virajasya bhagavato tasya savakohamasmi akatankatisya tusitasya vantalokamissasya muditasya katasamanasya manujasya antimasarirasya narasya anopamasya virajasya bhagavato tasya savakohamasmi namo tasya bhagavato arahato Samma Sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. To seek the refuge of the Noble Triple Gem, followed by observing the precepts, please repeat all together and after me. Buddhang saranang gacchami. Dhammang saranang gacchami. Sanghang saranang gacchami. Dutiyampi buddhang saranang gacchami. Dutiyampi dhammang saranang gacchami. Dutiyampi sanghang saranang gacchami. Tatiyampi buddhang saranang gacchami. Tatiyampi dhammang saranang gacchami. Tatiyampi sanghang saranang gacchami. Sarana gamanang sampunnang. Panatipata veramani sikkhapadang samadhiyami. Adinnādāna veramani sikkhapadang samadhiyami. Kāmesu micchāchāra veramani sikkhapadang samadhiyami. Musavāda veramani sikkhapadang samadhiyami. Surameraya majjapama datthāna veramani sikkhapadang samadhiyami. Tisaranena saddhiṃ pañcasīlaṃ dhammaṃ sādhukaṃ surakkhitāṃ kattvā appamādena sampādeta. Okay, you may all now be seated. And also, before we commence today's sermon, let us all take a moment to, considering how fortunate we are to be in receipt of the Buddha's teaching, make use of this opportunity to extend this opportunity to all those beings who we have come past in samsara, all those beings who will have on every occasion come across, helped us, assisted us, supported us in any way, shape or form that they could. We are now availed with the perfect opportunity to repay the debts that we owe of them, for all the good that they have done for us. So therefore let us extend this opportunity to them, wherever they may be in this 10,000 world systems, in whatever capacity they are able to join us, perhaps only to witness this meritorious deed, blissful plane, and then for those beings who are already in the blissful plane to be able to listen to the teaching, understand and comprehend it, and attain the supreme bliss of Nibbana. Considering this, our duty, our obligation towards all those beings, with compassion from the bottom of our hearts, as I now make this invitation out to all of them, I ask you to extend it to all those beings out there invite them to join us, to witness this meritorious deed, to listen to the teaching of the Buddha, to understand it, and to attain the supreme bliss of Nibbana. Samanta Chakravalesu Atra Gacchantu Devata Saddhammang Munirajassa Sunantu Sagga Mokkadam Dhammasavana Kalo Ayang Bhadanta Dhammasavana Kalo Ayang Bhadanta Dhammasavana Kalo Ayang Bhadanta. And also, before we commence the sermon, let us all take a moment to acknowledge that although today we are seeking solace in the Dhamma, and the Dhamma has helped transform our lives beyond our wildest imaginations, considering the times during which we were without the Dhamma, lost in samsara, without any way out, and having seen that the only way to seek satisfaction and happiness was at the expense of others, countless times we will have offended the noble ones, the noble triple gem, as well as the Sambuddha Shasana, through our words, actions or thoughts of revile, desecration, slander or insult. For any thoughts, words or actions of insult, slander and desecration that we might have directed towards them, either knowingly or unknowingly, the consequences of such actions may be that today, as we attempt to make progress in the Dhamma, such efforts are hindered, and it becomes extremely difficult for us to make progress. So therefore, before we begin, let us all take a moment to gather up humility and humbleness within our minds and hearts, to acknowledge and accept that we were not always as good as we are today. Therefore, with humility and humbleness, take a moment to seek forgiveness from the noble ones, the Samma Sambuddhas, Pacceka Buddhas, Arahata Buddhas, Anagamis, Sakrudagamis, Sotapannas, be they on the path or having attained the fruits, as well as the Sambuddha Shasana. So let us take a moment to seek their forgiveness for any thoughts, words or actions of insult, slander, desecration and revile that we might have directed towards them. Let us also, as we do this, make a firm resolve to never find ourselves in the situation where we have to succumb to our desire. And let us also make a final resolve that may, through the course of this sermon, we be able to acquire due merits, as well as to attain the teaching of the Buddha, and may such merits and understanding through our wisdom enable us to achieve the noble state of Sotapanna. And for any among you who have already achieved that noble state, may through the course of this sermon you be able to fulfill the subsequent stages, and may we be able to attain the supreme bliss of Nibbana. With that resolve deep-seated and firmly rooted in your minds and hearts, I invite you all to So, being the last Sunday of the month, as you know, today is our meditation week. Clearly, goes without saying, if listening to a sermon is difficult when there are distractions, then to focus, concentrate on a particular aspect of the Dhamma, and to cleanse your minds through the process of meditation can be that much more difficult with any distractions. So, as a reminder again, I ask you to set aside any distractions, anything that might distract you, including your mobile phones and any other devices which you may find in your hands or around you. Sometimes putting your phone on silent and putting it to a side is simply not enough. If your the arm has enough reach, then chances are when the going gets tough, you will feel it this way. You might just not be able to fight the urge to turn your phone around or just tap on the screen to see what's going on in the world out there. So these things can happen, and they do happen. This is why I'm particularly given the setting that we're in, where I'm unable to observe you and help create an environment which is conducive to your practice. I ask you to put in some self-discipline, and if you're serious about your salvation, then to take away any distractions that might bother you during the course of this sermon, because we don't have the time to kid about. This is a very short period of time considering the amount of time you spend throughout the rest of the week to be receiving instruction and to be able to follow the instruction. 2 hours a week, considering you don't come to the sermon, so there are no live sermons as such except for this for the time being. So do consider yourselves to be fortunate in that aspect, and make use of this opportunity. So set aside any distractions. Also, if there are friends and family at home, then I hope you have informed them that for the course of the next 2 hours to leave you alone and allow you to make use of this time for your liberation. So that's a gentle reminder, as always. So for today's meditation program, as we have been prepping for this, I think you'll remember I referred to this week over the last couple of weeks or so, and I have been preparing you for this. You remember from 1 or 2 weeks ago we started to talk about how do you find the culprit, and are you able to isolate the problem from the person? Are you able to isolate ignorance and attachment as being the culprit when it comes to errors in our judgment, errors in the way we react and conduct ourselves towards others? So we are going to be practicing that today. It's a very important skill to have, and through practice this gets better. I promise you it does. Perhaps today you may be able to actually sit down and remove your mind from everything else and focus on this before you are actually able to do an autopsy on the event which unfolded in the past, at some point in the past, and able to dig out ignorance and attachment. Remember, we talked about rewinding the tape using various metaphors and similes. I tried to explain this concept to you. This is what we're going to be practicing today. To go back in time, find an event which happened in your life which you are not particularly proud of, and you'll know what I'm talking about. If you think about the times where you felt desirous about something, or where you felt aversion, anger, hatred, where these negative emotions arose in your mind, or where you felt of that guilt, what we're going to be doing is we're going to go back and so as a forensic analyst or a scientist would do, we go back into the situation, the crime scene if you like, and we dig up the grave, we dig up the dead bodies if you like. So these are the events that happened. So you're going to be fragments of memory and as a result of that. So if you're new to the Dhamma and if this is the first sermon you're listening to, then I shall remind you again that what you hear on this could be toxic. Good can be detrimental to their practice. It's not going to be helpful, because it's impossible to turn a bad person into a great person. There's a staging process in between. First you need to go from bad to good And a good person feels guilt. A good person feels remorse about something that they had done but they shouldn't have. A great person doesn't feel either of these. And unfortunately, a bad person doesn't either. So as much as bad and great, they look the same, they're worlds apart. So we talked about this in the past. Do not be confused by what might seem similar on the face of it, but you need to understand that these two situations are entirely different. Okay, so I'm assuming that you're all practitioners of the Dhamma. I don't expect you to be knowledgeable in the Dhamma, but rather practitioners in the Dhamma. So you're practicing what we preach. Your lives have changed. You're being all the virtues and qualities that we have been talking about, as difficult as it may be, as hard as it may be, you are putting it into practice. Respecting your elders, respecting your teachers, your parents, being respectful and courteous towards all other beings, being kind and gentle, sharing with others what you have, being able to see the good always in a situation, and to be able to look at a problem and point your finger back at you rather than pointing it out to the world. Lots of things we've talked about in the past. Do not point the finger out the window, but rather into the mirror. Right? So hopefully you have been practicing all of these things, and as a result of that, you're a good person. So it's a good person who should really be doing what we are going to be doing today. Haven't broken bad? Then you need to go back and listen to the previous sermons. I would even encourage you to do that rather than continue with this particular sermon. That's how toxic it can be. So this comes with a dose of warning. Hopefully you're heeding to my advice here. So let's continue then. So what I want you to do now then is, first of all, take a few moments to identify one or two such events into which we will be giving this treatment. And for some of you, such events may come to mind almost immediately. Others may need a few moments to go back and remind yourself. But it's important to first identify 2 or 3 such events which you're able to give this particular treatment to. So see if you can go back in time. It may be earlier on today, perhaps it was yesterday, or maybe it was something that happened last week, maybe it was a couple of weeks ago, maybe last year, or perhaps when you were 15. Does not matter really. We just want something to work with. Something that is vivid in your memory. If you can remember the particulars of the event, then that's all the more helpful. And also if you feel very, very emotional about it, then that's all the more helpful. If it's an event which brings a tear to your eye, then that's quite helpful and handy, because that's a eureka moment, because you found something that really bothers you. So we need to run an autopsy on that and treat that particular wound that's festering in your mind. Or perhaps it's an event where it tugs on your heartstrings, and maybe you feel pretty bitter about it, or emotional about it, or perhaps even feel desirous about it. Maybe it's something that made you too happy, if you like. A happiness which, as we understand today, is free from relief from vexation. And upon reflection, you understand that such instances or experiences of joy are really instances during which there was relief from vexation rather than anything else, rather than true joy and happiness. So, or perhaps it was instances in which you felt self-important, you felt like you were deserving of respect from everybody else, or perhaps you felt undermined, or perhaps you felt that you could rule over everybody and give everyone a piece of your mind. These defilements can come in various sizes and shapes. So whatever the situation might have been, and they'll be personal to all of you, let's go back in time and find out 2 or 3 such events which you can then use to apply this treatment. Okay, so I'm going to give you a few moments now to go back in time into your life and pick 3. Let's not overdo it. 3 distinct events which you will be able to recall without a lot of difficulty, and 3 distinct events which you will be glad you are able to analyze and inspect, and hopefully give yourself some freedom once and for all, and allow it to rest in peace once and for all. Okay, so 3 events from your life experiences to which we will, following that, start applying the treatment. So off you go. I will give you a reminder in a few minutes' time. Okay, how are we doing? I'll give you 2 more minutes. If it helps, you could jot it down on a notebook, just so it remains fresh in your memory as we move on to the next stage of the session. And as I said, these events could be anything, literally anything. You will know if it's a right event, if it's a suitable event for you to be contemplating on. If you felt during that, as you go back into that situation in your life, you are either feeling one of these 3: desire, aversion, or delusion. Some examples perhaps that you might have, or some of the things you might have on your list, may include things like a time when you got angry with someone and you lost your cool. You tried to remain calm, but there was at one point where you couldn't control yourself any longer, and then you burst into anger. It could have been with someone in the family, maybe your children, your spouse, or perhaps a friend, maybe at the workplace. Could have been something like that. Or perhaps it could be something to do with desire or sensuality, maybe lust. Perhaps you had desirous thoughts about something, and today you feel that you have become a slave to it. Maybe it's to do with self-gratification. This is a problem that a lot of people have in today's world, where they create this sensual world in their minds, and then from that point forward they continue to live in those worlds. But as they come into the world of reality, and after everything is said and done, all that is left is a feeling of disgust, sometimes a feeling of emptiness, like you have wasted you wasted away your time and energy, feel drained. And for some of you, maybe you're unable to break that sort of habit. Maybe it could be that. So that's something we can analyze and do this post-mortem on. For some of you it may be that. For someone else it might be perhaps a habit which you're unable to break, and maybe it's in terms of perhaps delights that you seek in food. Maybe you binge eat something. Maybe you're trying to break some habits. Maybe it's smoking, or maybe it's desserts, or perhaps it's chocolate cake for some. It could be various things, as I say. There's no one right or wrong thing here, as in terms of the possible candidates for your autopsy. You can pick anything, or it could also be sometimes maybe a situation where you are reminded of a time when you spoke to someone in a very condescending way, and today you regret that. You think to yourself, I really shouldn't have spoken to that person that way. There was no argument or altercation, but you felt the other person really feel so small at the end of the conversation, and you completely destroyed their soul through the words that you uttered. And perhaps it's something like that, where you felt like you were better than the rest of them. So these are all possible examples that you can use to do the next part of this practice. Okay, so hopefully you've had enough time now to come up with some examples from your own personal life. So what we're going to do now then is we're going to, as I say, do a post-mortem on this. So we're going to cut it open, the situation. We've now dug up the graves. We had better do the autopsy now. It's already out of the grave. So this requires us to first be very clear on what we understand as ignorance and attachment. So what is ignorance and attachment then? Otherwise we go into the situation not knowing who to find. And then either you come out not having found the culprit, or worse than that, you come out finding that somebody else is the culprit. And then you have misinterpreted the situation. And then the wrong guy gets sent to the gallows. And that's worse than not knowing what to do with the situation. So what is ignorance again then? It's better to start off with attachment. Attachment is our affinity towards something. This is our liking towards something. You remember from 3 or 4 weeks back, we talked about the pen or the t-shirt, and how liking did not give us any advantages, but rather it was all disadvantages. There were no pros, there were only cons to liking and attachment. Attachment is the only aspect or the only element, the mental element, that is able to bring suffering. This is our notion that something has got to be a certain way. This is the expectation that we keep on things. You remember from our very first sermons, we talked about expectation being the culprit, right? So, as I say, this is not new. We have visited these concepts in the past, but what we need to do is continue our practice, and that's how we become better at it. So, expectation, attachment, they're all synonymous. You can look at it whichever way you like. So why do we set expectations? Then we need to go and find ignorance. Why do we set expectations? We set expectations because we believe that a certain configuration of things, conditioned things they are, is the way in which we are able to experience joy, pleasure, and bliss and happiness. So we believe that worldly situations, events, and the configuration of the way the world is at a given configuration is the preferable configuration. This is the way I like it. This is the way it's good. This is the way that I can experience pleasure. Okay? So it could be, you can apply this to any of the events that you have been able to conjure up. What we need to do now is to go into those events by rewinding the tape, pause the tape as the event unfolded, go into that event and see if you can dig out ignorance and attachment. So as you pull out ignorance, attachment will come with it. Let's take an example. Say, for instance, you have a real liking for pudding, and this is something that you want to be putting under the microscope today. So your liking for pudding, you have a real attachment, a strong attachment to pudding, and you know that when you have an attachment to pudding, having it or not makes no difference. Either way you're suffering. Right? So if you have your pudding, then, or if you don't have your pudding, which is the easier one for you to understand to begin with. So if you don't have pudding, then you're suffering because you don't have it and you want it. And if you do have it, then you're suffering because now a whole host of things such as fear and having to safeguard it and protect it and make sure that it's in the optimum state for you to consume it. All these things come as part of the baggage. So whether you have it or not, fear and grief are always with you. So therefore, whether you have it or not makes no difference to whether you're suffering or not. The moment you liked it, the moment you wanted it, suffering entered the picture. Okay? So why do we like pudding then? So if you like pudding, the reason you like pudding is because you believe that either the taste or the smell or the look of it, it's one of these three things, or it could also be the way it feels in your mouth as you put it in. Any one of these things, or one or more of these things, you may consider pleasurable. You may consider a source of happiness. So let's take, for simplicity's sake, the taste of it. To think that the taste of pudding is pleasurable is the reason you are attached to pudding, is the reason you feel suffering when you don't have it, and is the reason you feel suffering when you also have it, when you do have it. So when you have this attachment to pudding, then whether you have it or not, the suffering is there. And the reason for the suffering is the attachment, and the reason for attachment is this notion, this belief, set of beliefs you have, this view that you hold, that pudding is pleasurable, the taste of it is pleasurable. Okay, so there are other aspects, but I'm only concentrating on taste for the sake of this conversation. But is it really? How can we say that it's pleasurable when not everyone in this world, it could even be someone else in the family. When you are presented with the two options, pudding or ice cream, it may be that your preference is pudding, but someone else at home, their preference is ice cream. So that is a clear indication that they are not able to experience what it is that you're experiencing in the pudding. So then it cannot be a subjective, or rather it cannot be an objective assessment. This, the way you feel about pudding is the way they feel about ice cream. So you're both making subjective assessments on this particular type of food, and based on that, this taste, you have an attachment, a liking towards it. That puts your mind into a state of vexation, and that relief from vexation is what's bringing you pleasure. So you know all of this stuff. This is just a reminder. Okay, we've spoken about all of this in the past plenty of times, so we know all of this. So if that is the case, what we need to do now is to ask ourselves, this set of beliefs that we hold, we need to verify it. Is it true? What I believe about this pudding, is it true? Is it correct? Does it stand the test of truth? And if you put in your life experience, it begins to make sense to us that actually this is not true. So why do we like to hold on to a set of beliefs that is untrue? Clearly you wouldn't want to do that. So when something is untrue, then you almost immediately are able to let go of it, because no one wants to hold on to a belief that they understand and they know is untrue. Okay, so these beliefs that we hold on to because we feel that it's a true assessment. So in the case of pudding, then now you should be able to pause the tape once you've rewinded it to that particular time in history, go into the situation, do the autopsy and try and find out ignorance and attachment, and then pull them out. Pull them out and now ask yourself, again, present the two options to you, pudding or ice cream. See if you can actually make a call on this occasion. If it wasn't for pudding, or if it wasn't for your attachment to pudding, if it wasn't for this belief that pudding is such a delightful food, would you make the same judgment? The way I explain this to someone when they ask me how can they practice this, I ask them to take a certain anything, just an item into their hand, and I think what we had at that time was a rubber band. It doesn't really matter. It could be a pen, maybe the pen that you've got in your hand, whatever, right? So here's what you need to do. Hold it to your chest and then ask yourself, do you want the pudding? The answer will be yes, I want the pudding. Why? Because I like it. Why? Because I believe that this is pleasurable. What you're holding to your chest, this pen or this item, whatever that item is, it doesn't have to be a pen, it could be anything, right? Whatever thing you're holding in your hand, what you need to understand is that is your ignorance and attachment. So you're holding it to your chest because we are representing the mind here. So you're holding it in your hand and holding it against your chest. So what do we do now is we move our hand away from our chest with that particular item in our hand, we move it away from ourselves, and then ask ourselves the question, which one do you want now? So by this we are representing the fact that we are extracting ignorance and attachment from our minds, taking that away, and now asking the question, which one do you like now? Which one do you want now? Do you want pudding now? And the answer is going to be a straight and simple no. I don't want pudding. If you're not hungry, then there's no reason for pudding right now. So what we do again is we bring our hand back to our chest. So it could be a clenched fist if you like. You don't necessarily need to have anything in your hand even, but it's easier to reflect on it this way. You could just have a clenched fist and bring it back into your chest, towards your chest, and now ask yourself the question again. So this is how we rewind the tape, and then we play the tape, rewind it, and then take out ignorance and attachment and play the tape again and see the response, the change in response. You will then be able to realize that you're only able to respond, yes, I want my pudding, when you have your fist or that item that's clenched in your fist held close to your chest. As you move your fist away from your chest, and by which you are representing ignorance and attachment being moved away from your chest, you no longer have a preference. And now it does not matter what you have, whether it's pudding or ice cream. It does not. You really don't need it. If you're not hungry, you don't need it anymore. So when you do this 2 or 3 times, and this is not just a case of doing it, but you need to do it as you reflect on it. As you do it a few times, now it'll become evident to you that actually, hang on a second, it wasn't I who wanted pudding in the first place. Ignorance wanted it. Ignorance wanted it, not I. I didn't want it, ignorance wanted it. So why is it that I am eating pudding when ignorance is who wants pudding? So once you are able to do this, now we're almost personifying ignorance and attachment here. And then what we do is we speak to ignorance and attachment. Just imagine that it's another person, like the demon that possessed you. Right? You're now talking to this other person and saying, hey, hang on a second, if you want pudding, go get it. I'm not eating pudding because I don't want pudding. If you want pudding, go eat pudding. I don't want pudding, so I'm not going to eat pudding. And then the more times you do this, folks, the more it becomes very evident to you that, hang on a second, why am I putting myself through this pain? What do I mean by pain? Well, you need to either make pudding, you need to buy pudding, bring it home, you need to eat it, you need to, you wouldn't be doing any of those things if you weren't hungry. But you're doing it now because ignorance and attachment are dictating the way you live your life. What I'm saying is, if ignorance and attachment was a separate individual, if it were a separate individual, and it's they who need it, would you put yourself through such pain and turmoil when really you have nothing to gain out of it? And also clearly you understand that ignorance and attachment are your enemies, not your friends or your family. I mean, one could say, well, I do put myself into hardship if it's for the sake of my family. Yes, that's for the sake of someone you love and someone you care about. Fair enough. But here we are talking about ignorance and attachment. Ignorance and attachment never did anything good to you. Whenever you'd done something wrong, ignorance and attachment are always there. So you have a perfect alibi now. So it wasn't you after all. It was never you. It was ignorance and attachment. I'm trying to show you how you can separate the problem from the person. We need to start this with ourselves before you try to apply the same concept onto the outside. Start with yourself. See if you can separate yourself from the problem. Okay, so what we're doing is then going back into past events, doing this autopsy. We're doing a post-mortem. We're cutting open the situation, or rather we are various metaphors I've used here, so you can go with whichever one works best for you. Pausing the tape, we're going into the situation, opening up our minds, drawing out ignorance and attachment, and you can really do this if you, as I say, you hold something to your chest and then you move it out, you move it away from your chest. Now you know what you're doing here is you're actually taking out ignorance and attachment. And now ask yourself the question: would you respond in the same way to that series of events, to those circumstances? So that's to do with the food. I'll take one more example before we begin. Take a time when perhaps you fired up and you got angry about something or someone or some event. Excuse me. And you shouted. You heated up. You lost your cool. You lost your temper. Excuse me. So how did you conduct yourself in that situation? Are you proud of how it all turned out? Perhaps if you're not proud about it, then today you're feeling guilty about it. So here's how you tackle this guilt, because this guilt is misplaced, as well as putting blame on yourself is misplaced. Excuse me. So putting blame on yourself is misplaced here, because it's not you who's supposed to be blamed. So how do we analyze this situation? Go back into history, into a time in history where this event happened. So perhaps one of your three events will be one in which you lost your temper. Now rewind the tape to that point in time. Stop. Go into the situation. Go into your mind. You can actually visually imagine this. So you're standing or you're sitting down, and there's the other person that you're taking your anger out on, right? So the whole event is now frozen in time. Now you're going into the situation, going into your mind, taking out ignorance and attachment. To represent this, you can move your arm away from your chest, holding whatever it is that thing that you had in your hand, in your clenched fist, to represent ignorance and attachment. So you move it away from yourself. Now you come back out of the mind and hit the play button and see how it unfolds from there on. Would you react in the same way? Would it be the same response that comes out to that event? So why do we do this again? As you do this, you will now begin to realize. So do this a few times. With each event that you have picked, do this a few times. Say a handful of times. Okay, so with each event, you'll have picked 3 events at least, and with each of these events, I want you to do this a few times. And every time you do it, see if you can identify that the problem here is not me, it's ignorance and attachment. The culprit is ignorance and attachment. They are who to blame. It's they who are to be blamed, not you. You're innocent. Look at what ignorance and attachment did to you. Not what you did, not what you said, not how you reacted, but rather how ignorance and attachment reacted. Last week's sermon was spirits and possessions, if you remember. Right? How a spirit possesses you. And now, can you be attributed to the way you act? Clearly not. It's the spirit that's doing this here. So similarly, what I'm asking you to do now is point the finger at ignorance and attachment. Not point outside. This does not go against the things we've spoken about in the past. This is still inside. But now, rather than pointing it at a general self, what we are doing is we are pointing it at a very specific ignorance and attachment. Okay, so with each of these events, I want you to do it a few times, do it a handful of times until this becomes really, it really starts to make sense. And as I say, if you really do this the physical way, which is hold something in your hand to represent ignorance and attachment, hold it close to your chest, and then move it away from your chest. And now ask yourself, would I really do it this way? Would I have conducted myself in the same way? Okay, and then rewind the tape and bring it back in. Bring your chest back in, or rather bring your fist back into your chest, and now play the tape, and the tape will play exactly as it happened. Rewind again. Move your hand away from your chest, as in to represent you're taking out ignorance and attachment from this situation. See what happens now. So play the tape again. Now you'll see that the outcome is entirely different because your response is different. You would not say those things. Remember, once you've taken out ignorance and attachment, what do we call you? We call you an arahant. So how would you, the arahant, conduct yourself in that situation is what we are asking here. Okay, so hopefully you're all ready now then. You've all got 3 events at least. And with each of these events, I want you to do this at least 4 or 5 times. And on each time, so this is not just going with the motions. That's not what's important here. To really sink this into your mind, to really cement this in your mind, and really help this come to light. I need you to reflect on and really super concentrate on this. Okay, so analyze the situation. Take out ignorance and attachment. See how you would act. Put ignorance and attachment back in, and now see how you would act. Okay, so hopefully the instruction is clear there. Let's do it a few times, and I'll give you a few moments to practice this, and we'll discuss the results after we have concluded. Okay, so if you're all ready, find a comfortable and convenient, comfortable place to sit. You don't have to be sat for this, but it's your choice there. I just want you to be able to do this as freely. So don't think about anything else for the time being. Just do as I have asked you to do there. This is an autopsy you're doing. Take out ignorance and attachment. Ask yourself, would you conduct yourself in the same way? Put back ignorance and attachment. Now how do you do it? And every time you do it, it's a lesson you're teaching yourself. I am not the one to blame. Ignorance and attachment are to blame. So it becomes clear to you that ignorance and attachment are the culprits here, not you. Okay, so let's do that. If you're ready. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. be. Healed with the ultimate bliss of Nibbana. Healed with the ultimate bliss of Nibbana. Healed with the ultimate bliss of Nibbana. May I and all beings in all worlds be healed with the ultimate bliss of Nibbana. Healed with the ultimate bliss of Nibbana. Healed with the ultimate bliss of Nibbana. May I and all beings in all worlds be healed with the ultimate bliss of Nibbana. Healed with the ultimate bliss of Nibbana. Healed with the ultimate bliss of Nibbana. Okay. So now I want you all to take a moment to think about how that went. What was your experience there? For most of you, if you were able to do that effectively and as I instructed, particularly those of you who might have struggled with feelings like regret and guilt and repentance, will have found some solace there. And they are also a large portion of people that I'm trying to target here. Because guilt, regret, remorse and repent, these are emotions which will hinder your practice. They are blockers on your way. Because these are manifestations of delusion. And with delusion, you are unable to make progress. You can't be a good doctor unless you are able to distinguish the patient from the infection or the disease, from the ailment. And the same concept applies here. A doctor cannot feel bad for having come across a patient with a particularly severe condition or an ailment. It's for the patient to feel bad, not for the doctor. Because if the doctor starts to get emotional, now the doctor is not in a sane state of mind to be treating the patient. So the same concept applies here again. Until and unless you're able to distinguish you from the problem, you can't treat the problem. So this is a very important skill to have. I can't emphasize this enough. You will need to learn to apply this to people and events outside of your own as well. But you need to start to practice this with yourself. To identify that things that have happened in your life, things that you regret today, things which you are ashamed of, you need to be able to isolate you from the disease, from ignorance and attachment. So how successful were you in doing this? That's a rhetoric question. I want you to ask yourself that. So these events that you analyzed, were you able to go into those situations, rewind the tape, pause, go into the situation, and I ask you to visualize it, Usually it would have involved another person, normally it was, unless it's something that it's perhaps a sensual indulgence that you partake on by yourself, but one which you're ashamed of, which you don't want the rest of the world to know. So otherwise, usually it would involve another person. So were you able to visualize that situation, go into it, and in your post-mortem, were you able to identify the true culprit, ignorance and attachment? Because only having done so are you now able to start treatment. If you can't isolate the disease, or if you can't isolate the infection, how can you start treating? This is like tagging it. You go into the event and you tag the actual culprit, the disease causing bug. Once you tag it, now you can let loose the medicine, and then it goes and targets exactly where it's needed. For those of you who are familiar with physiology will understand that a similar mechanism works inside the body when your antibodies start to work against various bugs that come into your body. So we need to first mark it. We need to tag it, tag the actual bug here. That's ignorance and attachment. Without that, we are treating the unknown, or we are treating a generality, not a specificity. And that's not effective. So were you able to do that with these 3 events? This is why I asked you to do it a few times with each event. And if you were able to do this, as I hope you have, for those of you, as I said, who were feeling guilty, you will now be able to understand that guilt is a misplaced emotion. Really shouldn't be you who's feeling guilty. Ignorance and attachment should be feeling guilty. Because after all, it wasn't you who did that. Remember spirits from last week. You cannot be held responsible for the actions of someone who has possessed you, or something who has possessed you. It's that which that has possessed you. If it's that who is controlling your every action from there on, your thoughts and words and actions, then clearly you are not to blame there. It's that which has possessed you. Remember we talked about a caterpillar, or not the insect caterpillar, but the land movers that you have, these big machines, bulldozers. We talked about that last week. When someone gets into a bulldozer, the driver is who controls the vehicle. The vehicle is no longer, it never was, in control of what happens to it. So whether it's used for construction or destruction, it's not the vehicle that's responsible for it, it's the driver who's in command and control who's responsible for it. Now likewise, when your mind has been hijacked by ignorance and attachment, you can no longer be held responsible for your actions. So when you start to analyze this problem from that angle, are you beginning to understand that actually it's not you who's to blame? I'm on your side. I'm not on the side of ignorance and attachment. I'm on your side. So I'm with you here. Because it might be that, a lot of times people, when they want to make a confession, this is where a lot of people struggle with confessions. Patients have no problem walking up to a doctor and talking to the doctor about their ailments. And most of the time the problem is that they'll exaggerate the symptoms. Right? When it's a sore thumb, they'll say my whole arm is hurting, we need to chop it off. So they'll exaggerate the symptoms. Why? Because the patient identifies that it's not me who's to blame here. It's the ailment or the disease or the bug, the infection, that's the problem here, right? So any of you in the medical practice will know this. Usually patients will come and exaggerate the symptoms, and when they start talking, you can't get them to shut. And sometimes if you give them a mild treatment, they're not happy with it. They'll ask for something more severe. But think about when you had to make a confession to someone. When you had to go to someone and say something you'd done, or ask for forgiveness, say sorry, how difficult that is. It's incredibly difficult, isn't it, to be the first to go and apologize? Why is that so? See, now you should be able to make sense of all this. Put two and two together now. The reason for this is because you believe that it was you who did it. You believe that you are the culprit. Ignorance and attachment got away with it. They're laughing their socks off. They came in, they did their mischief, and then when it was time to give the punishment, they're gone. Now you have to suffer. I need you to be able to analyze these situations in your life from that angle, from that perspective. Because then you'll begin to understand that I am not responsible here. Ignorance and attachment are responsible. Remember, this is not a get out of jail free card for everybody, okay? This is why I said you need to have broken bad before you even listen to this. If you're an evil person, if you are someone who feels no regret or remorse, either you're an arahant and then again you don't need to listen to these sermons, right? Or your temperament is so low that you know this is not the medicine you need right now. Your mindset first needs to change from bad to good. A good person, as I said, feels regret and remorse. A bad person does not. They'll rejoice in their bad deeds and in the harm that it has caused others, in the damage that it has inflicted on others. They'll rejoice in it. They won't regret it. If you're someone who regrets, then listen on. You'll see why I made that emphasis at the beginning of the sermon. If this is toxic for you, if you're not a good person, if you don't feel regret and remorse, then this is not for you. Okay, so are you now able to see that in each of those events that you took, you opened up, you analyzed, were you able to identify? When ignorance and attachment were in your mind, you conducted yourself in the way you did. But when you paused the tape, you pulled out, you drew out ignorance and attachment, and now you replayed the tape. Were your actions the same? Did you say the same things? Did you think in the same manner? Did you conduct yourself in the same way? Wasn't the outcome so entirely different? So hopefully you're able to at least begin now to understand that the finger needs to be pointed at ignorance and attachment. The problem is this though. So if it's ignorance and attachment, then Swaminathan, so why do we need to worry about it? Let it do its bad deed and so who cares? But the problem is, if you're the passenger in a plane that's being hijacked by hijackers, you can't say, well, so who cares? Because you're the passenger in the plane. When the plane crashes, well, you know what happens. If you're a passenger, then you're going to die along with it. So you can't just say it's ignorance and attachment, then finally I'm free. That's not the case. If you have identified ignorance and attachment as being the culprits here, now we need to pick up pace to get rid of them from our minds. Remember, the consequences of all the actions when ignorance and attachment reign in your mind are yours to keep. This is the bad part. This is the sad part. Ignorance and attachment will kill someone. You have to go to prison for it. Everyone who's in favor of that, put your hand up. Ignorance and attachment will steal and lie and break a bank. You will get imprisoned for it and get a life sentence. If you're in favor of that, put your hand up. If ignorance and attachment will cheat. Think about, perhaps one of your situations you took was when maybe you cheated on someone, a loved one. And now every time you think about it, you almost feel like they're doing open heart surgery on you while you're still awake. Good. Why? Because you feel regret. So you're a good person. But you cheated. This person that dedicated themselves to you and committed their entire lives to you, you cheated on them. And you're unable to let go of the grief and the guilt that comes with it. Analyze the situation. Are you able to identify that it was ignorance and attachment that did the cheating bit, and now it's you who's doing the suffering bit? After all, it's ignorance and attachment who's doing the suffering also. But let's take that one step at a time. Because you don't find an arahant who suffers emotionally for the bad deeds that they did when they were not an arahant, right? So that's the next step forward. But think about, perhaps, if you got caught and maybe you ended up with a black eye. Now that was yours to keep, wasn't it? Or maybe you had to deal with the aftermath. You got caught, the whole relationship broke up, and then you were on your own. What happened then? Ignorance and attachment did the bad deed. They caused all the mischief, and then when it's time to suffer, they're nowhere to be seen. Anyone who's in favor of that, put your hand up. Or what about that time when you ate something rotten? You hadn't realized that it hadn't gone off, but it was not something that you should have eaten. It was something you weren't supposed to eat because it had gone off, or whatever reason. It was something that was going to give you an allergic reaction. You didn't need to eat it at the time. You didn't need any food. You didn't have a hungry stomach. But ignorance and attachment came in, and you saw it. Now you had to eat it. Started eating it, and you spent an entire week with diarrhea. Ignorance and attachment weren't with you to take the diarrhea. You had to do it. You had to go through that. Or the allergic reaction, you had to go through that. Or perhaps, if it's something something piping hot, and you think it's so delicious and you just want to eat it. You can't wait for it to cool down a little bit. It's just come out of the oven. Looks delicious, looks so nice, looks so yummy. So what you do, you dig in and you take that spoonful or whatever, and you put it in your mouth, and now you have a burnt tongue. That's yours to keep. Where's ignorance and attachment? Nowhere to be seen. We all have such experiences in our lives. Or when you felt like saying a swear word to someone. You kept saying those swear words, and like the woodpecker that picked into a banana tree. What happened? Last time you swore at someone, it turned out to be the thug of the village. And then what happened? You know what happened. You thought it was fun to do, or perhaps in your school days. If anyone has experienced getting beaten up, bullied, ignorance and attachment are the culprits again. See, after all, ignorance and attachment, not just in this birth but also in previous births, they already caused the damage. Now it was just the consequences that were to come to you in time, over the course of time. If you have ever been bullied, that's ignorance and attachment to blame. Not of that of the other person, I don't mean that way. I mean ignorance and attachment that prevailed in your mind at some point, either in this birth or in a previous birth. Ignorance and attachment made you bully someone else. And then when it was time for you to be bullied, now ignorance and attachment are nowhere to be seen. So you end up with a black eye, a broken tooth, torn shirt, right? And the bruises. Ignorance and attachment don't come to suffer. Anyone who's in favor of that, put your hand up. So you see, once you're able to identify ignorance and attachment as being the culprits, now you realize that I need to start treating this like nobody's business. Because if you don't, you're simply suffering for the misdeeds of someone else. I mean, just think about it. Okay, I'll give you a situation to think about. Let's imagine you received a parking ticket. Now, I think in Sri Lanka they stick the ticket on your windscreen, but which is the same sound, but you also have the cameras, right? I don't know if they have it here now, but in some other countries, if you drive on a bus lane, for instance, you get a ticket sent to your home address, a fine, so you have to pay up. Let's imagine they got the wrong car. So it wasn't your car. The camera misread the number plate, and it was another car, right? You received the fine or the bill for it, and now the letter for it, and now you have to pay up for it because it's come to your name, to your address, and you know that you were never there. That's not your car, because you can identify that straight away. Put your hand up now if you're willing to pay. Someone else drove in the bus lane, not your car. Are you willing to pay for it? Clearly the answer is no. Thankfully. Oh, if there was a robbery somewhere down the street, okay, somewhere along your street there was a robbery, and the police turn up, and then they take you into custody. So they, just one fine day, the police knock on your door, and of course that there's been a robbery down the street, because as a talk of the street, everyone's talking about it, and the police come and they take you into custody. 100% that you're innocent. No one in your household was ever attached to it or in any way responsible for it. You weren't even there at home when the thing happened. Actually, that might make you responsible for it. You were at home when it happened. So you weren't at that place. You were at home when it happened. Okay? So you are entirely innocent. If the police would come up and to your door and take you into custody, would you quietly walk away with them? And just say, yeah, you know what, tough luck. It's my turn this time. Yeah, let's go, fine. Or would you protest? Now, isn't the first thing you say, I need to talk to my lawyer? Wouldn't you argue your case and say, hey, how, you got the wrong man here. I know nothing about it. Yes, there's been a robbery, but why do you think it's me? I didn't do it. Prove it to me that I did it and I'll come with you, but not otherwise. You'd get angry. You'd protest. I mean, think about the last time someone might have accused you of something that you hadn't done. How did you feel? Someone accused you of shortchanging them. The shortchanging happened, but it wasn't you who did it. It was a mistake. Did you not feel quite bad about the fact that they accused you of it, and they're accusing that you did it intentionally? Did you not fight back and say, hey, excuse me, right? Yes, it happened, but it wasn't me. I didn't do it intentionally. Come on, right? People make mistakes. It wasn't me. Have you never found yourself in such situations? Stop accusing me. I didn't do it intentionally. It wasn't deliberate, right? It was only a mistake. So when all that seems to upset you so much, how come when ignorance and attachment put you into the worst kind of scenarios and situations that you want to find yourself in, into the most terrible of consequences that you'd hate to find yourself in, when ignorance and attachment do it every single time, you seem to be okay with that? If you want to pick a fight, that's who you ought to be picking a fight with. Not the next door neighbor with ignorance and attachment. You need to be able to identify them as being the culprits. Otherwise, you're not treating the disease. That's why I said to be the doctor, not the patient. Because the patient is he's emotional. He or she, the patient's emotional. They are going through the motions. They're going through the emotions. They're riding the wave. The pain and all that, they're experiencing it firsthand. But as the doctor doesn't experience the pain. He witnesses the pain. He can observe it, but he doesn't experience it. Are you able to observe ignorance and attachment as being the problem here? In each of those events that you analyzed a moment ago, were you able to observe ignorance and attachment as being the culprits? Perhaps some of you might have thought about an addiction you have. Maybe it's a food. Cake, ice cream, cigars. Maybe it's alcohol. Maybe it's pornography. Or maybe self-gratification. Addictions. Were you able to go back into the event and identify ignorance and attachment as the culprit? What I'm saying is stop beating yourself up about it. Because you're barking up the wrong tree. Look what ignorance and attachment has done to you. Not look what you're doing. Look what ignorance and attachment has made you do. See, if you are able to look at situations like this, you become a much cooler and calm person. Because once you're able to see this problem in this manner within yourself, the next step is you will start to then apply it onto others also. Remember, metta always starts with yourself. That's why may I and all beings in all worlds. Not may all beings in all worlds and I. I mean, that's grammar, right? They say put the donkey last. But when we practice metta, you start with oneself. First, you need to find cool and peace within. You need to be able to identify ignorance and attachment as being the culprits within your own mind. For every misdeed, for every wrong action, word or thought, it was ignorance and attachment inside your mind. When you're able to do this, you can then move on to looking at this way when you deal with others also. It could be your children. If your children have done something wrong at home, say they've done a misdeed, something mischievous, if you are able to identify ignorance and attachment within yourself as being the culprit, now you can start to do it with your children also. Then you will be able to see, rather than feel angry, you'll be able to empathize with them. Because then you won't see your son having done something wrong. What you will be seeing is what ignorance and attachment has made your son do. Or even better, what ignorance and attachment has done to your son. Just imagine this, right? If your child ever came home abused by someone, would you hit them, your child? How dare you get abused? Would you shout at them for being abused? I mean, they clearly had no say in it, right? That's what abuse is all about. It's when something's done to you against your will. So if you wouldn't attack your child for having been abused, when you see something wrong, when your child has done something wrong, something you don't condone, when you are able to see ignorance and attachment as being the problem here, now you'll see that ignorance and attachment are abusing your child. Now who should you hit? This is why a parent who understands this, they'll think twice before inflicting punishment on their children. Is it wrong to hit children? That's not what we are discussing here. What I'm saying is, whether you hit children or not, I want you to first be able to identify the real problem. There's a common enemy here. Now go into the child's mind if you can. Now before you do it with everybody else. If you have children, you're into your child's mind, or if you don't have children, maybe if you're married, into your spouse's mind, or perhaps your best friend, or maybe your mother or father, sometime an event in your life where they did something which you weren't happy about, right? Go into that, into their mind if you can now. So all this time what we did was we went into our minds. Now go into their mind for a moment, rewind the tape. Now go into their mind. Now see if you can spot ignorance and attachment again, doing their dirty deed all over again. Okay, so if you have identified ignorance and attachment, are you not now seeing how the person is being abused here? Your child is being abused by ignorance and attachment. Your husband, your wife is being abused by ignorance and attachment. Your mother or father, they're being abused by ignorance and attachment. Your friend is being abused by ignorance and attachment. Your colleague is being abused by ignorance and attachment. That man who deliberately shortchanged you in the shop where you went to do your groceries, buy your groceries. He shortchanged you deliberately. But hold on. Rewind. Go in. See if you can find the culprit. Take out ignorance and attachment and now ask yourself, would he have done the same to you? Because now you are talking about an arahant. Would he? Clearly not. So then who shortchanged you? The shopkeeper or ignorance and attachment? So is it fair then to shout at the shopkeeper? Who would you file a lawsuit against? So Swaminas, is it wrong to file a lawsuit? That's not what we're talking about. Whether you file a lawsuit or not, I want you to be able to identify the culprit here. So then you'll be able to understand that we all have a common enemy, all 8 billion of us. We all have a common enemy. See how the world has united in the face of the COVID-19 epidemic? Everyone's talking about the virus, right? So everyone identifies that this is a threat to humanity. When people are able to spot a common enemy, then everyone's united. This is the way it works. This is the way our minds work. When we are able to spot a common enemy, no matter what our differences are, we unite in the face of threat. So you can clearly see that with the ongoing problem, with the virus. Across borders, across races, no one's talking about racial discrimination nowadays, are they? No one's talking about blacks versus whites. I don't know of any cross-border wars that are going on these days. Certainly not. Nothing surfacing. Why? Because we all now have a common enemy. Everyone's united now in the face of a common enemy. See what happens when you can spot a common enemy? Then we start to help each other out. We start to look out for each other. Now we don't take out our anger, our emotions on each other, because our anger or we understand that the threat is not each other, but the threat is an external source. And the same thing happens whenever there's an epidemic of this sort. Remember when the tsunamis happened in Sri Lanka? Everyone united. People didn't talk about their religions and their faiths. Whether you were a Muslim or a Christian or a Buddhist or a burgher, it didn't matter. Everyone helped each other out. If they forgot, they put aside all their differences because there was a common threat, a common enemy. But when you're not able to see that common enemy, now we start to take it out on each other. See how blind the world is and everyone in it is when they don't see that ignorance and attachment are the common enemy. People are taking it out on each other. They fight each other. World wars. I mean, really, who should the world war be against? Not who, but rather what should be against ignorance and attachment. I'll be even as blunt as asking you this question. Who was it that was responsible for the mass murder of the Jews? If you're saying it was Hitler, you got it wrong. Ignorance and attachment. And you know, across the border of Pakistan and India, the wars ensued to this day, right? Who's responsible? Can you spot the common enemy? If you just think about it, right? In all of the courts in all the court cases that are going on, just take this country for the time being, right? So you have in court, you have one party that accuses the other party of injustice. Now, who is accusing who again? Take out ignorance and attachment from all parties. Now, would you have a need for courts? Because after all, none of them are really accusing ignorance and attachment. You don't file a lawsuit against ignorance and attachment, you are filing it against a particular individual or a person. But when it's ignorance and attachment that's responsible, who do you file your court case against? So do you need courts then? That's why at this monastery we are fighting the common enemy. You right now, we are all fighting the common enemy. But of course, to start that fight, you need to have seen the common enemy. Until such time, people will have to pick up guns and pistols. They will need bombs and bioweapons. They will need them. Why? Because they haven't seen the common enemy. They're fighting each other. When a marriage starts to go foul, one party would accuse the other party of unfair treatment. And then eventually that goes into a divorce case. And sometimes it ends up with the family breaking down. Now the children have to suffer. Everyone has to suffer. So Swaminathan, is it wrong to file a divorce case? That's not what we're talking about here. Have you been able to spot the common enemy? Who mistreated who? Take out ignorance and attachment from both parties. Now who's being mistreated and who's mistreating? Did you not fail to spot the common enemy? In all those events that you took up at the start of the sermon and you went and dissected them. See, now ignorance and attachment should become clear to you so vividly as the common enemy. This is the common enemy. This is the common threat we all face, not just all of humanity, all sentient beings. You've heard of the war against the Devas and the Asuras. Waste of time, wasn't it? People who keep abreast of the going-ons in the world, they come and tell me this country is now threatening that country. And this country is waging war on the other country. Oh, and the politics are so bitter. and it's all on a knife's edge. You never know when. Things that shouldn't be said are being said. Things that shouldn't be done are being done. They've all lost the plot, haven't they? They all fail to see ignorance and attachment is the common enemy. So, having not seeing ignorance and attachment as being the common enemy, what do? They fight each other. Guess what ignorance and attachment are doing? As people fight each other, they're laughing their socks off. Now they are observing. They're probably giving high fives to each other. We did that, and look at what they're doing to each other. Anyone in favor of that, put your hand up. Are you seeing the problem here, folks? Hasn't everyone lost the plot? Just the next time you watch the news, right? Next time you go online or read up on the news, see if you can find the common enemy. When one political party takes the other political party to the laundry and they start washing dirty linen in public, right? Can you spot the common enemy? Guess what ignorance and attachment are doing right now as these two parties accuse each other? They're giving high fives to each other. Who? Ignorance and attachment. And these people, the politicians and various other individuals involved in personal grudges and conflicts, they're in courts, they're earning money to pay their court fees, they're in fear, anger, fighting each other. The whole world's gone mad. So is politics wrong, Swami Nohansa? Wrong question. Are you seeing the common enemy? Because really, let's not waste time talking about stuff that there's no point talking about. Are you seeing the common enemy? How much of your time do you, in the day, folks, right? Just be honest with yourself. How much in the course of the day do you spend fighting the common enemy versus picking fights with innocent people? Say your wife shouts at you or something. She's lost her temper because of something you've done. Right? When she says something, are you the kind of person who retaliates, who shouts back? If you are, you've lost the plot. Shameful. It's not a bad thing to do, it's a mad thing to do. Only a madman shouts back at someone who shouts at him. Only a madman swears back at someone who swears at him. Not a bad man, a madman. They've lost the plot. Because they're not seeing the common enemy here. As someone shouts at you, if someone's tearing you a new page, they're swearing at you, right? Go into analysis mode. Put on your lab coat. Metaphorically. Just visualize it. Just put on your lab coat. You're now the scientist or you're the doctor. Put on your stethoscope and see if you can, like you played doctor when you were young. Remember how you played doctor? Well, I'm asking you to do that again. Play doctor. Can you take a new perspective on what's unfolding in front of your eyes? Why are you seeing someone shouting at you? Can't you see ignorance and attachment and what it's doing to the man standing in front of you? Not what he's doing to you. Can you see what it's doing to him? So is it any wonder then someone who sees it is unruffled in the face of blame? How can he conduct himself in any way other than metta, karuna, mudita and upekka? I mean, is any other response even possible for someone who sees ignorance and attachment as being the culprit? So is it any wonder then the Arahants, the great elders, the Buddha himself conducted themselves in the way they did? When he said anger never begets anger, you can't respond to violence with violence. In other words, what he's saying is you can't fight ignorance and attachment with ignorance and attachment. Clearly, now you just got more of them. Just think about it, right? Two armies are at war, and when one army needs reinforcements, they call people from the other army. That's a joke, right? So when you want to fight ignorance and attachment, what good is calling ignorance and attachment? Are you seeing the common enemy? There'll be 101 situations as the next week unfolds in front of your eyes, into which you can apply this. Countless situations in your life into which you can apply this. Spot the common enemy. That's your task for next week. See how much of a difference it will make to you. If you have understood this, you won't be asking me questions like, Swaminatha, is it wrong to punish our children? I'll tell you this, you should be punishing ignorance and attachment. That much I can tell you. The rest I'll let you figure out. You won't need to ask me if someone shouts at me, I can't control myself, Swaminatha. I feel like shouting back at them. I can't control myself. Well, then see what ignorance and attachment are doing to you. And when someone shouts at you, before you lose your control, see what ignorance and attachment are doing to him or her. You got to be the observer here. Take yourself out of the picture. Be the observer. The moment you see that this is being done to you, now everything gets all emotion and very, very personal. But if you can be the observer here, now you'll see things as it really happens. You will now be able to see the unseen. You'll see how ignorance and attachment are destroying the person in front of you, or who's shouting at you, who's taken their anger out on you. Look at what ignorance and attachment are doing to them. And then, if you feel bad about it, that's not that person doing anything to you. It's ignorance and attachment, again, doing it to you. So really there's no connection between the other person and you. The link is ignorance and attachment. Doing whatever to the other person, and ignorance and attachment doing its deed to you. There's no link between you and the other person. Are you seeing the common enemy? Have you spotted the common enemy? Because then when someone shouts at you, you won't be capable of feeling anything but empathy. If someone says anything to hurt your feelings, and that could be deliberate, you won't be capable of anything but empathy. Inside your mind, in your heart, you'll be feeling, I know what that feels like. That's how you will feel towards the other person. In your mind, you'll be telling yourself, I know what that feels like. So I feel for you. This is an advanced way of thinking, folks, I tell you. You need to have an advanced mindset for this. This is an advanced skill. With a primitive mind, you can't do this. You need to be an advanced human being. An advanced mind you need to have. This is a skill. As I said, you need to develop, you need to work on this. The more you practice this, the better you'll get at this. So if it's not easy to do right now, what do you think you ought to do? Give it up? Because it's not easy to do? It's never going to happen. Everything was at one point not easy to do for everyone. But among them some did it nevertheless. And therefore today you see people who are able to do things better than others. When they all started, it was the same for everybody. It's a level playing field. No one has a handicap and no one has an advantage. It's a level playing field. Nature is fair on everyone. Nature does not take any sides. There's no bias. Nature is fair on everyone. So why are some people improved? Why have some people improved when others are still lagging behind? Because when it was difficult, those who persevered, today they have become capable. Those who gave up, today they'll say, I can't do it. It's difficult. It's too difficult. I can't do it. I don't know how. Excuses. This applies to everything. Worldly pursuits as well as your supramundane pursuits. What I'm asking you to do is next week, see if you can spot the common culprit, the common enemy. As things unfold in front of you in your home, right? With your husband, with your wife, with your children, with your colleagues, either face to face or over Zoom, see if you can spot the common enemy. And then empathize with them. There are no bones to pick, there are no fights to pick. You've just got a common enemy. Once you identify the common enemy, seriously, don't summon reinforcements from the enemy's side to fight the enemy. You must understand how ridiculous that sounds. If that sounds ridiculous, then think about doing it. I got angry. Why? He got angry. God, that sounds ridiculous. You should now be able to see the sense here. I saw ignorance and attachment. I wanted to fight it. Therefore, I called more ignorance and attachment. That's why the Buddha said, Nahi verena verani. You can't fight hate with hatred. This is a universal law, it's a timeless law. Sammanti da kudajanam, averena sammanti, esa dhammo sanantano. Timeless. You can't fight hatred with hatred. You can't fight anger with anger or violence with violence. To fight anger, hatred and violence, you need compassion. You need the opposite of it. To fight ignorance and attachment, you need wisdom, which is the opposite of ignorance. And patience and virtue. These are the things you need. So, call upon reinforcements. Not from the enemy's side, for heaven's sake. Because you're just exacerbating the problem. So that's your task for next week. Okay? So you practice this on 3 events in today's meditation session. You will have countless events as the week unfolds. So you won't be left with no material to practice. There'll be plenty of opportunities, whether that's in the household or at work or in school, wherever. Practice and practice and practice. If you don't practice, then you won't reap results. Listening to what I'm saying, as I always remind you, is only half of it, half of the battle. Now you're just learning the art of war. This is learning the art of war. But you only get better at war when you actually practice. So wage war to make peace. Fight in the name of peace. Can you spot the common enemy? Okay? A couple of weeks back, I shared with you a merit transfer that I urge you to do before you partake your meals. I'm hoping you have started doing it and you're doing it regularly. As a reminder, so this is just a reminder in case you'd forgotten. Some of you had asked where I had taken that from, so I did the translation of it, but the original text comes from the book Suduminissu, which I made reference to when I first mentioned this a long time ago, and I was involved in the proofreading of the text, and there are lots of good things I have personally learned from that. So one of this was to make it a habit to transfer merits before a meal. I think the sermon was titled Taxi Driver. In case you missed it, you can go back and listen to it if you have the time. And I, in that sermon, I highlighted the significance of doing this, the importance of it, and how it brings, as I mentioned, as some people have inquired also. And the book will become available in the coming future. So there are lots of good things I learned from that, this being one of them. So in any case, whether you read the book or not, I urge you to take time to transfer those merits before you take your meals. Once you practice it, it will take you less than 10 seconds. It does not. You don't have to drag it on and kind of do it half an hour It doesn't have to be like that. 10 seconds is all you need. It's the thought that counts. So just a reminder, do it. It will be very useful to all of you who do it. Okay? And when we first started doing the sermons, once the lockdown kicked in, I talked to you about timetables. So again, this is a reminder for those of you who have not been working to a timetable. Please go back and update your timetables. Make it reflect what you're doing currently. Because a timetable should be used as a friend and not as an enemy. It's not there to give you the stick. It's the carrot, not the stick. Your timetable should be used in that manner. So make sure it reflects what you do on a day-to-day basis. If it doesn't, then update it. Provided you are comfortable and you agree with the things you're doing, update your timetable to reflect reality. That's what you need to be doing. Because the more free time you have, the more you need to make use of a timetable, because it helps you discipline yourself. Because whether it's free time or not free time, it's time at the end of the day. And time is being spent with every moment that you're alive, and this is your life that's ticking you by. So, just reminded you of some things we talked about in the past, in case you had forgotten or had not given it enough thought. Please do them, and don't forget the homework for this week, which is to spot the common enemy. As the events unfold in front of you, maybe it's when you watch the news, maybe when you're reading a newspaper, or just walking down the road and you see people, the way they behave with each other. Can you spot the common enemy? Even if you see a couple holding hands, right? You might think, oh, so sweet. Really? Can you not spot the common enemy? No, it's not common friend. It's common enemy. Why are they extending their arms and holding hands with each other? They're both relieving themselves from vexation. That's what's going on. So what vexed them in the first place? Ignorance and attachment. Friend? Clearly not. That's an enemy. But little do they know that they have a common enemy. See, this is a new perspective, I tell you, it is, I agree. Observe the world with a new perspective. This is a new lens with which you need to look at the world. And then you realize, with so much ignorance and attachment, I really need to get the hell out of here. And no matter where you look, you're going to see an abundance of ignorance and attachment. That's just all over the place. Not all the Buddhas who have come so far into this world, and not all the Buddhas to come in the future, will be able to rid this world of ignorance and attachment for good. It'll be a never-ending project. It'll never end. It'll always be there. Ignorance and attachment will always be there. So our task should not be to cleanse the world of ignorance and attachment once and for all. That in itself is ignorance. What we need to be doing is first work on ourselves, look after myself, for everyone else, and then, while we are here, help as many people as you can to free themselves from ignorance and attachment. Remember, as many people as you can. Not everyone. That's an impossible feat. Don't embark on it, you will lose your mind. I'm pretty certain when the Buddha attained enlightenment and he became the Supreme Buddha, he must have scratched his head wondering, what did I even think as a Bodhisattva? I thought I could free everyone from suffering. What was I even thinking? Clearly he only realized that upon gaining Buddhahood, that he must have asked himself, what was I thinking? Because he realized that the feat it's unachievable. You can't free everyone. You first free yourself, and then help as many people free themselves. That's what our purpose on this earth should be. That is acting with metta. with benevolence towards all sentient beings. Okay, so on that note, we will conclude today's session. And prior to doing so, let us take a moment to transfer merits, and transfer the merits to all those who are deserving of these merits, particularly to those who we must feel grateful towards for all that they have done to help and support us. Do remember that the reason we are able to listen to the teaching today in this way, considering also the geographical distance that lay between us, thank heavens for the internet, right? And the technology that has been invented. Had it not been for the computers that we use, the internet and the networks and everything that joins everything together, you would be completely without any of this. So there are lots of people for us to be grateful to. And then those who make you aware of these sermons, because they have nothing to lose by not informing you of them. But if someone took the time to perhaps give you a CD, or maybe a book, or maybe a link, shared a link to a sermon, all that was done with an abundance of compassion. We really must take a moment to appreciate that and be grateful for that. So as we transfer merits, I really want you all to ask yourselves, who was it that introduced you to the Dhamma? It couldn't have been me. I only met you after you came here. So it was someone else. Someone among you. Maybe someone in the family, maybe a friend, maybe some acquaintance, or maybe perhaps someone from the workplace. Maybe it may be that today they're not even in the Dhamma. They've moved on to other things. So be it. Their destiny was that. They came into this world to bring you into the Dhamma, and then that's it. Their turn will come some other time. But for their time to come, we need to transfer merits to them. This is us repaying our debts and our gratitude to them. This is our obligation, and it's the right thing to do. So let us all take a moment to transfer merits. Also, do not forget our parents, teachers, our siblings, all those people who have shaped our lives to what it is today. They will have sacrificed so much to bring us where we are today, to help bring us up and shape us the way we are today, to be able to learn the language, to be able to understand what is being said. All our teachers who helped us with that, we need to be grateful for that. And everyone who's helped us to find the requisites, 3 square meals on the table to help quench our hunger, or sate our hunger, quench our thirst, and to be in the comforts of our homes, all the people who have helped with that, we must be grateful towards them. It may be that they did it for remuneration, maybe it was for the money, but not all the money. You don't have enough money to, let alone put a meal on your plate, rather than thinking about anything else. So it's not just money that has helped bring all this to you, to live your lives as comfortably as you are able to do today. It's not just money that's helped you there. The goodness in other people's hearts have helped you with that. This is why the universal currency we spoke about in the previous sermon, we need to pass on the merits to all of them, in the hope that if any of them are today in woeful planes, may they redeem themselves and be born in the blissful plane. Because unless you're in the blissful plane, you have absolutely no hope of freeing yourself or identifying the common enemy. There's absolutely no hope of that. And then once in the blissful plane, to spot the common enemy, you need to be able to listen to the teaching of the Buddha. Listening to any other teaching is no good. It has to be the teaching of the Buddhas. Has to be. No other teaching will help you with that. So, to have enough merit to listen to the teaching of the Buddha, one is extremely fortunate. So they need merits also. So let us transfer merits so that they are able to come across the teaching of the Buddha one day, someday, maybe tomorrow, maybe in 100 years from now, whenever. May they have enough merits. It is our duty to see them well, because they did what they could for us. And then, having listened to the teaching of the Buddha, they will identify the common enemy, and then they'll wage war. They'll start their battle with the common enemy. And then once they embark on that relentlessly and with perseverance, one day they will destroy the common enemy. And with that they will achieve ultimate bliss. All that requires merit. This is why it's so important for us to transfer merits to them. And clearly, as you know, the transferring of merits is also a meritorious deed. So it just proves the give and you shall receive principle that the Buddha taught us. If you transfer merits, you can't not receive merits when you transfer merits. There's no way you can do that. It's an impossibility. You can't not receive merits when you give merits. There's no way you can do that. It's technically impossible. So when you transfer merits, just the activity of doing that, the mental process of doing that, acquires more merits. This is why this is so powerful. Long may everyone be able to reap the results and the rewards of the Sambuddha Shasana, because this is the place where we all come to find our peace. So in that hope, let us transfer merits to all beings and conclude the sermon. So first and foremost then, let us all take a moment to remind ourselves once again that we are so extremely fortunate to be in receipt of the Buddha's teaching, to consider ourselves his disciples and to consider him our master, our teacher. Let us take a moment to transfer merits to the Bhikkhu, Bhikkhunis, Upasaka, Upasikas who since time immemorial protected and preserved the teaching of the Buddha and passed it down through the generations of the noble lineage in the form of the Tripitaka, which is today available to us to study, understand, comprehend and attain our liberation. May they all rejoice in the merits that we have all acquired today. Let us also take a moment to transfer merits to all members of the Mahasangha resident throughout the world, wherever they may be. May they all rejoice in the merits that we have all acquired today. Not forgetting for a moment the members of the Mahasangha resident in your local temples and nunneries. It is they who have always been by your side, through thick and thin, come rain or shine. May they all rejoice in the merits that we have all acquired today. Let us also take a moment to transfer merits to the Guru Swami Nuhanse, as well as all the other monks resident at this monastery, and the Anagarikas, as well as the Anagarikas who are attached to the monastery. May they all rejoice in the merits that we have all acquired today, as well as the friends and benefactors of the monastery, for their devotion, dedication and commitment towards the well-being of the monks and Anagarikas, as well as all those who come to seek refuge in the Dhamma. May they all rejoice in the merits that we have all acquired today. May through the power of these merits, if any of them have today been born in woeful planes, redeem themselves and be born in the blissful plane. And may through the power of these merits they abstain from the unmeritorious deeds, fulfill the meritorious deeds, fulfill the noble eightfold path, and may they all attain the supreme bliss of Nibbana. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Let us also take a moment to transfer merits to our parents, siblings, uncles, aunts, nephews, nieces, grandparents, husbands, wives, children, friends, teachers, and all those who have helped us and supported us and assisted us in any way, shape or form that they could. May they all rejoice in the merits that we have all acquired today. They saw us through well in times of difficulty. Anyone and everyone who might have helped you, supported you, assisted you, take a moment to transfer merits to them. May they all rejoice in these merits, and may through the power of these merits they be free of all physical and mental ailments. May any obstacles that lay between them and their liberation, their salvation, be taken away. May they rejoice in the merits that we have all acquired today. May they abstain from the meritorious deeds, fulfill the meritorious deeds, fulfill the noble eightfold path, and may they all attain the supreme bliss of Nibbana. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Let us also take a moment to transfer merits to the Devas, Brahmas, spirits, demons and the dead, wherever they may be. May they all rejoice in the merits that we have all acquired today. If any of them have been born in woeful planes, may they redeem themselves and be born in the blissful plane. May through the power of these merits they abstain from the meritorious deeds, fulfill the meritorious deeds, fulfill the noble eightfold path, and may they all attain the supreme bliss of Nibbana. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Let us also not forget to take a moment to transfer merits to the members of the armed forces as well as the police force who fought a long war in Sri Lanka, and thanks to them today we are able to live in peace and harmony. To those members of the armed forces, as well as friends and foe who lost their lives and are today in seek of merits. May they all rejoice in the merits that we have all acquired today. Let us also transfer merits on this occasion to those who have been affected by the ongoing epidemic, as well as those who have dedicated themselves to healing those who have been affected and helping them out. May they all rejoice in the merits that we have all acquired today. May through the power of these merits they be able to free themselves from all such physical and mental ailments. May they, if any of them have been born in woeful planes, redeem themselves and be born in the blissful plane. May they abstain from the unmeritorious deeds, fulfill meritorious deeds, fulfill the noble eightfold path, and may they all attain the supreme bliss of Nibbana. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. And finally, let us also take a moment to transfer all these merits to those who have dedicated themselves to propagating the teaching of the Buddha, to transliterating these sermons, recording them, making them available to the masses, and sharing a thought towards other sentient beings in the hope that one day they are able to reach the Dhamma and find their salvation. It is through deep compassion that they do it. May they all rejoice in the merits that we have all acquired today. Those who might have introduced you to these sermons or introduced you to the Dhamma, may they all rejoice in the merits that we have all acquired today. May through the power of these merits they abstain from the unmeritorious deeds, fulfill the meritorious deeds, fulfill the noble eightfold path, and may they all attain the supreme bliss of Nibbana. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. And finally, may through the power of all the merits that we have all acquired today, we be able to witness the advent of many hundreds of thousands of Arahat and Mahanses and Arahat Mehin Mahanses in this land and its very life itself. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. And finally, may through the power of all these merits, you and I and everyone who has contributed to making this event a possibility, a success, however large or small that contribution might have been, may they all rejoice in these merits, and may through the power of these merits they abstain from the unmeritorious deeds, fulfill the meritorious deeds, fulfill the noble eightfold path, and may they all become an Arahatun Mahansa and Arahat Mehin Mahansa in this life itself and in the era of the Gautama Supreme Buddha itself. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. The members of the Mahasangha will now transfer their blessings to you. Raga ginnen midetwa, Desha ginnen midetwa, Moha ginnen midetwa, Nibbana parama sukhayen, Sukhita tara etwa, Nibbana parama sukhayen, Sukhita tara vetva. Nibbana parama sukhayen, Sukhita tara vetva. Mamada siyalu loka, siyalu satvayo, Nibbana parama sukhayen, Sukhita tara vetva. Nibbana parama sukhayen, Sukhita tara vetva. Nibbana parama sukhayen, Sukhita tara vetva. Raga gini niveva, Vesha gini niveva, Moha gini niveva, Nivan sapa labeva, Nivan sapa labeva, Nivan sapa labeva. Tunuruwange suvisi ananta mahaguna belin, sila lok, sila satyam, Nibbana parama sukhayen, Sukhita tara vetva. May I and all beings in all worlds be freed from the fires of desire. May I and all beings in all worlds be freed from the fires of aversion. May I and all beings in all worlds be freed from the fires of delusion. May I and all beings in all worlds attain the supreme bliss of Nibbana. May the Noble Triple Gem be with you all forever. We will conclude the sermon on that note. May the Noble Triple Gem be with you all.